Hey, everybody. Hope you're well. This has been an explosively fascinating week in the history of ranked choice voting in retrospect. And it started for me really a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, where actually during the election, longer than that, I found what I believe was an anomaly in the ranked choice vote transfer pattern. Thank thanks to my relationship with Alameda County um, Administrator Susan Marinici, who talked Tim Dupuy, our registrar in Alameda County, to coming on to my show. We were able to have a good long discussion about that Tim called a TED talk, and it revealed a great, for me, number of very uncomfortable points about the way I stressed the way ranked choice voting was done in Alameda County for the November 2022 election. And there were a number of questions Tim could not answer or um, deflected to the Secretary of State. So fast forward to this week and yesterday, and Mike Hutchinson, an Oakland school board member who is running for reelection, pops out with news that the ranked choice that the registrar of voters, Mr. Dupuy, called him and said, "Hey, by the way, you won the race that originally looked like you lost because we went in and we discovered an error in the ranked choice voting algorithm." And but he told that to Mike, and Mike, being a social media guy, put it out there. And so I contacted Tim, and Tim texted me a link to the press release he just happened to have completed. And so I thought, there's one person, and I intended to talk with my friend Brent Turner before this happened, right? We were talking about having a show to talk about ranked choice voting and the anomalies before this happened. And my longtime friend Brent Turner, who is an expert in the problems of electronic voting and ranked choice voting going back, I would say, a half a generation, was only too kind to come on and talk with me about what he thinks is going on here in the Oakland, Alameda ranked choice voting context with our good registrar, Tim Dupuy. I would say that because it's not personal, but it is the business of democracy. I thank you for blessing us to be on with your presence on our show, Brent, and I'm not kidding. Uh, so, as far as I'm concerned, you're the gold standard expert about this. What do you think is going on?
Well, thank you, Zenny, for the kind introduction. I'm not sure that about the term gold standard because we hear that bandied about in election security circles, and usually that means there's something wrong. So I'll wait for another title, but yeah, everybody thinks they're the gold standard, and I think we're yet to achieve the gold standard when it comes to elections in the United States, unfortunately. And so let's start the conversation there with, I think, the issue that immediately comes to mind when I hear about the problems Alameda County is suffering, and that is the reality that, unfortunately, when you're dealing with voting systems that are operating on intellectual property protected software, you have no oversight capability. And really, the vendors are in control of the environment. So for that, Tim Dupuy is caught in the crunch of his being in the back seat of this event. He may look like he's in the front seat, but actually the vendors are driving the car. And this is the problem that we've complained about for the last 20 plus years as open source software advocates for election technology. So what you have here is an already unacceptable system with vendors and corporations controlling the software that does the vote tabulation and the rest of the process. And then you have this unique and unusual overlay of ranked choice voting coming into the situation. And now you have a genuine cluster because nobody knows what's going on. And if they tell you they do, unfortunately, it's my conclusion as an analyst in this area that either they're confused personally or they're fibbing, being less than forthright and honest. So none of that is really acceptable. And this is why we advocate for general public license, open source technology, especially if you've got a ranked choice voting jurisdiction, because as you see, and now we're witnessing a smoking gun, which is very unusual to come across. There wasn't even a smoking gun in 2016 that we could successfully point at. We went to the U.S. Supreme Court on that one, and there was no smoking gun per se. This is an admission by an election official that the system is broken. And he's trying now to point, I guess, back at the Secretary of State, but you probably have the up-to-the-minute facts on it.
I think you're right about what Tim is seemingly trying to do. I don't know if you had a chance to watch our interview. And if you did, would like to know what you thought about it. Did you have a chance to watch it? Or
I watched bits and pieces. I didn't get the opportunity to watch the entirety, but I spot checked it through and saw enough that I felt awkward about watching it, because I know that Tim is doing the best he can. And again, he's as much of a victim of the legacy technology as the public. Although, not to overly defend him, because the fact is he's had an opportunity and has been given the information plainly with repetition of the way to proceed to higher ground on this issue. And he chose to ignore that information, as many registrars have chosen to do. So I think he has made his own bed for the most part.
what does it say that he, first of all, in that interview, said that he would actually look at my finding of an anomaly, acknowledges that it exists, but then when he puts out a press release that says, hey, by the way, yeah, this is hinky, and gives a step as to what happened, doesn't return my phone call to have him on to basically pick up where we left off now that the cat is out of the bag, right? So what does that say to you?
Well, that doesn't strike me as unusual. What strikes me as unusual is that he spoke with you in the first place, because that's where he fell over, was in speaking with you, because I think a fellow with your technology chops can and did put him in a corner intellectually, so that there is no defending the situation. There's just an admittance that it's broken. And now we have to take that information and try to untangle it. Well, the reality is he can blame the Secretary of State if he wants to, but he's also a part of this. And everybody's been playing along as if everything's okay. Whereas the experts that actually know what they're talking about at the highest levels of technology have plainly been telling not only the Secretary of State, but the registrars nationally, it doesn't work the way it is supposed to. And we have issues that can be corrected, but there's been a lack of political will to make the corrections. And now we see, well, first of all, we saw 2000, I think, initially with Bush v. Gore. We saw 2004 with Bush v. Kerry, where there were now more computerization. And then we saw, obviously, 2016, where a lot of people, including the national security community, had findings that were disturbing. And now we heard the uproar of 2020. That was more of a ballot management concern on the part of the Republicans. But the idea is we want to have systems where you can clearly show the loser that they lost. That will help to avoid further civil unrest in the United States, and it will inspire voter confidence. So the sad thing is we have the technology to move forward, but that open source general public license software technology is being blocked by the status quo preservationists, the corporations and the current vendors, the people that sell software, basically.
Where do we go from here with this? And I know that San Francisco had a situation where they were looking at an open source system, but it didn't seem to gain the level of approval. And then, of course, there was the matter of the election official himself under scrutiny. Um, is what's happening over there a kind of a foreshadowing for what Alameda County may see in the near future, or should see? You know,
Absolutely. What we're seeing is actually New Hampshire and Mississippi leading the United States on appropriate voting system technology. They're the first territories that have moved toward open source voting, paper ballot voting. So they're setting the gold standard now. San Francisco has had every opportunity to do so. We've taken exception with their head of their elections department, their director, John Arnst, who's been in the newspapers being rallied around by the likes of Tucker Carlson. And we're unique in San Francisco. Usually it is, even though it's a nonpartisan issue, usually it's Republicans going after a Democratic Party leader, election person. In San Francisco, it's Democrats trying to get rid of a Republican. We assume he's Republican. I don't know if he's stated, but that's the feel of it. Is we have corporate interests really dominating in San Francisco and making mincemeat out of the politicos, so that even though previous boards of supervisors have given 11-0 votes, telling the county to immediately move toward open source voting systems, there still are blocks in place, not only at the county level, but at the state level, that are prohibiting these better systems from moving forward.
Can you discuss those blocks? Those blocks, I take it, are people, right?
Well, there are people that appear to be affected by corporate interests. So not to say that they are corrupted, they just happen to be doing the same things that corrupted people would do if they were corrupted. So they're unusually taking exception to the progress of the public systems that are capable of protecting the democracy and alleviating a lot of these problems. And instead, we're locked into this legacy vendor situation where we're seeing a tremendous amount of not only price gouging, but crappy systems in general.
That's interesting. Is price gouging? Are they designing this mainly in cahoots with the government or organizations to get more money for both sides? I'm going to come back to that in a second, but I'd like to know your answer regarding what you put out there. That's quite a provocative situation, for want of a better term.
It is provocative, and it gets, the closer you look, the worse it gets, which is unfortunate. Naturally, over the last 20 plus years, we've had the opportunity to deep dive behind the curtain. And what we see there is lobbyist pressure and basically a predisposition to default to the legacy vendors. And it's not appropriate because the stakes are so high. We have outside country interference agents that are fairly obvious to the intelligence community. We have problems with the systems that can be addressed with the open source model. But the open source folks that are pioneering here, there's a group called Voting Works, a nonprofit that just piloted in New Hampshire. And they've been more than willing to participate with San Francisco County and Bay Area counties, but they're just being stalled. And the motivations for that are really hard to uncover. But we realize, it has something to do with the county governments and then the state government.
Has anyone looked at this? I'm sure the answer is yes. From a pay-to-play quid pro quo perspective?
I'm sure there's always a multitude of investigations occurring, and I've been very surprised that I haven't seen those eventuate as of yet, but you never know what's going to happen the next day. And this has been a long battle, but of course, this battle has been going on in the United States, forever. Since our inception, there's been people that want to play around with elections if they're allowed to do so. And, this is Jim Crow, basically 2.0. In my opinion, there's not a lot of black women owning election system companies. This is, a perpetuation of Jim Crow, in my opinion.
Hey, when you say that, I want to run by, I didn't expect you to say it, so I want to run this by you. I think you might find it interesting. You might be somewhat aware of the voting problems that have gone on down here in Georgia, where am for my mom, while my friend watches my place in Adams Point, but that's another story. And the election official, the assistant secretary, the number 2 behind Brad Raffensperger, who was our Secretary of State, recently said 3 weeks ago that they're actually looking at adopting, of all things, ranked choice voting. And so now that I hear Jim Crow, I think of the Jim Crow South. I think of the problems that we're experiencing with ranked choice voting that I didn't think were going to happen. I was a fan of ranked choice voting, but I'm not a fan of how it's done. But what do you think would be the attraction, other than the stated desire to reduce costs for runoff, in the case of the Atlanta and North Georgia and Georgia region, state rather?
Right. Well, there are some attractive sides to ranked choice voting, the economics of it with an instant runoff, and the thought that by playing around with the ballot, you can free people up to vote with their heart and their conscience, rather than for them to analyze a spoiler effect. And it would allow them to rank someone that they weren't really sure could win, and therefore they wouldn't vote for them in a bullet system. But now they're freed up to do so. So they end up voting for a Kucinich rather than an Obama, if they think that, or a Nader or someone like that. And then through the rounds of voting, if Nader didn't win, then their second selection of Obama would come in and save the day, so that we wouldn't end up with a Bush. That's kind of the scenario. Well, there's conversation to be had about that, and whether or not that's played out statistically as presented. But there are downsides with ranked choice voting. I think the immediate one that comes to mind is our inability to audit robustly within the ranked choice system. And then certainly there are problems for me that create a non-starter with it, which is if you're putting it on top of a proprietary intellectual property protected software. At that point, it's a non-starter, because you're the expert at this point. You're seeing it play out in real time. There's confusion about what's really happening and who's in charge and who knows what. And I think the dirty little secret is, if that's the scenario where you're putting ranked choice on a proprietary system, you are at a loss to provide proper oversight and explanation to the public. And we're seeing that play out in real time now in Alameda.
I'd like to read to you the actual press release. I'm going to assume you haven't seen it, but I have it right here. And in the enlarged version, so you don't have to strain your eyes, it reads as follows: ranked choice voting tallies. Several jurisdictions use ranked choice voting, RCV, to conduct their elections in the county of Alameda. The ROV, the Registrar of Voters, learned that its RCV, ranked choice voting tally system, was not configured properly for the November 2022 election. It should have been configured to advance ballots to the next ranking immediately when no candidate was selected for a particular round. This means that if no candidate was selected in the first round on the ballot, then the second round ranking would count as the first round ranking, and the third round ranking would count as the second round ranking, and so on. For the November 2022 general election, the setting on the county's equipment counted the ranked choice voting ballots in the manner in which the ballot was completed, meaning no vote was registered for those ballots in the first round of counting because the voters did not identify a valid candidate in a particular rank on the ballot. Once it became aware of the issue, the registrar of voters immediately investigated it. The registrar of voters worked with its vendor to figure out the source of the issue and to resolve it. After reviewing the election data and applying the correct configuration, the registrar of voters learned that only one outcome was affected. Oakland School Director, District 4 for the Oakland Unified School District. No other result for any ranked choice voting election in any jurisdiction was changed. The registrar of voters has notified the City of Oakland, the Oakland Unified School District, School Director, District 4 candidates, and the Secretary of State of California. The registrar of voters is currently working with its vendor to provide safeguards so that this does not happen in future elections. It leaves this number and everything else. And I wrote below that at that point, everyone I talked to sees this as proof there was a problem with the vote. I called Lauren Taylor, Mayor-elect Shangtao's challenger, and while he's not ready to go public with any statement, at least it was at the time, he's very concerned about the news. And I noted that one thing that really stuck out to me, Brent, was right off the bat, he writes, Tim Dupuis, that the registrar of voters learned that its ranked choice voting tally system was not configured properly for the November 2022 general election. Now, what I want to know is was that obvious? Because my contention when I talked to Tim Dupuis was that, hey, look, you've got a system out here that's producing a weird same percentage vote share transfer with each round every single day of new rounds of counting of the vote. And I said, I don't care on this side or the next. That doesn't happen in nature. It happens in man-made, right? But in nature, I mean, come on. That you should expect a random pattern like, all right, 20% transfer on this day, 80% on this. And at the end of the week, you get 59.5%. All right, bingo, got it. But that percentage or thereabouts, microscopically different when it is every single day, no. And so him stumbling over his words was just, it was more concerning than comical. Even as much as I laughed.
Well, concerning is an understatement. This is the fabric of our democracy being put in jeopardy by vendors that are not competent to continue providing the service. The people have a right to expect that the election systems work properly. And when it's pushed over into vendor world, now you have a group like put the software together for Southwest Airlines running the elections, you're in trouble. So that's the reason, again, for the open source community wanting to come in and clean this up. And it's not rocket science for the open source community folks, even though some people that are in the way of the progress of the national security upgrades would like to say that it is difficult and the open source community can't accomplish it because of this or that. Well, that's hogwash. The open source technologists are our best and brightest, and they're at the ready. They're just being blocked by a lack of political will. And again, this is corporate gamesmanship occurring, and you're seeing it play out. We know the truth and the reality of how this happened, how we got here, and how we get out of this mess. My suggestion to the politicians, the Aaron Peskins of the world and others, is let the folks that actually know what they're talking about, the better technologists, do their work and secure the elections for the sake of the democracy. There's no plan C here. There's just what we're doing now, and then there's the open source plan to come in and clean it up. So if there's a third plan, someone should let us know. I haven't seen it, and now we're suffering the ramifications of this corporate vendor lock-in.
I want to get, I don't know, Deborah Hudson. She's been quite attentive at making sure she follows these conversations, and I appreciate that. But as a person who regards himself as a progressive, even though there are people who think I'm whatever, I don't care. I have to disagree with this because of the fact that I'm paying attention to it. But she writes, I can't believe that Bay Area progressives are so backward on voting transparency. Is that, what say you about that observation?
Well, she may be correct regarding the Progressive Caucus of the Democratic Party. They were stuck on stupid to the extent that they were advocating for hand counting for the longest time. And there were a lot of fundraising groups saying to Middle America and others, send us your money and we'll get rid of the computers altogether. And that was their position. Well, we knew that was grifting. So, we put up the fight to say the computers aren't going away anytime soon. What you do is you use the systems, but you implement better technology, get rid of the corporate veil of secrecy, and utilize general public license open source with some better designs. And now you'll be on the right road. Again, it's not rocket science for these smart people that have focused on this issue. The issue remains is getting these entrenched interests out of the way, and these politicians that want to protect the corporate interests. My point of confusion is I never know who's just in the way naturally or who's really in on it, and you can't really get behind the curtain to that extent. But we do know that the open source community has been at the ready to provide service on this issue. Luckily, New Hampshire is letting them do their work along with Mississippi. But how embarrassing that here with Silicon Valley down the street and with all our technology people, that California is still suffering this same old issue.
Well, before we tail to a close, I want to share with you, this is, for those people who haven't seen it, this is the meat of the 35-minute portion of my conversation with Tim Dupuis, the good Alameda County Registrar, that, arguably got a little dicey, but for good reasons. And, well, I'll just play it right here.
Times twice a day.
Yeah. So I haven't, okay. So I haven't dived into the specifics, so I asked you to set.
Let me go back here, just right about here. Okay. There, right there. Oops.
The thing that's different about a Verbo vacation home, you always have the whole place to yourself.
To be investigated. It's way too weird, especially since Shang was not Alyssa's second choice, and their names are not even next to each other on the 2022 Oakland election ballot.
Let me go back here, right about to.
Then
about here.
I'm not going to play it. He says, all right, runs, I can go back and.
Right here.
Moreover, the Alyssa victory, was given the majority of her vote, giving the majority of her votes to Shang Tao, is in a giant-sized batch is a pattern I noticed from the second day of ranked choice voting runs up to Friday. Okay. While I did not check the percentage then on the second day, I would not be surprised if it came out to be about 60%. And these aren't runs I can go back and go into your system and check. I have to vlog them, and I vlog most of them, but not all of them. And I noticed this anomaly a couple of days before I started to really zero in on it. Hence, but I did mention it in those previous videos. But I digress. And so, and I wrote in this interview with Alyssa Victory 2 days ago, and I'm not going to play it. He says, at the 5:30 mark, I note that she gave over 58% of her shareable ranked choice votes to Shang when I presented the run from Wednesday, November 16th. That's just less than 1%, far less than 1% difference from Thursday to Friday. Note that Alyssa does admit that Greg Gage had her as number 2, but says that people can vote however they want. That's what she says. For me, the point is, Alyssa's people had a weird pattern of picking Shang 58 to 59% of the time through the entire run. And then I go on to make sure this hits home intellectually. All right. I find it very concerning that the same 59.64% or thereabouts, rounding the 60% percentage of votes, was shared from Alyssa Victory to Shang Tao for each of these runs each day, because you were releasing these runs by email daily.
That's right.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but in my opinion, that looks fishy. As if someone were pre-picking votes for Shang using a code that broke off roughly 60% of the votes and dumped them into Shang's column on a spreadsheet. One should expect an uneven or non-linear pattern. This one is far too machine-like. And then I write, why the uniform outcome on a per-run basis? That's to be investigated. It's way too weird, especially since Shang was not Alyssa's second choice, and their names are not even next to each other on the 2022 Oakland election ballot. And then I continue and I write, I want to make sure you understand the gravity of this problem. First, we presumably have votes counted each day for each candidate. Second, one should expect that the percentage of those new votes counted and shared in ranked choice voting to be different for each day of the vote count, right? In other words, they're different each day, but they come out to 59% on the end, okay? Right? Third, that's where the problem comes in, the vote. The percentage of those new votes counted and shared in ranked choice voting from Alyssa Victory to Shang Tao is, for all practical purposes, nearly the exact same percentage each day. That makes no sense at all for that pattern to turn up 3 to 4 times in a row, unless, in my opinion, it was predetermined. But that's what happened. Your response, Tim.
All right. So let's talk about ranked choice voting and a little bit about our updates. I think the comment that says, that maybe have been how they campaigned, and that's what they may have asked their people, their supporters, to choose as their second vote. But people are allowed to vote how they want to vote, right? That's they're independent. So, I've been doing this for a while, as you know, and I've seen elections where it follows essentially a straight line on the percentage. And I've had people who say, well, that's how all elections should run. We should see the early votes on early votes and what we post on election night. We should be able to do like a statistical sample, back from our statistics classes, we do a random sample, and that small percentage should just straight line project out at that rate. And that's how we should see what the outcome is going to be. I've seen some elections where that seems to be the case. It follows a straight line. I've also seen some elections where
Was voting?
for any voting, right?
I mean, for ranked choice. That's why I say for ranked choice.
No, I'm just saying in general, sometimes the early votes are mimicking what the rest of the votes come in as. Sometimes the early votes are not representative of what the later votes come in at, and we see divergence. So I've seen both cases, and I've seen arguments. You can imagine we hear people evaluating the elections in all sorts of different ways, and they expect to see things following patterns. Well, it isn't a lab. It isn't following, a predetermined pattern. Voters are voting the way they vote.
I have to ask because I don't mean to be adversarial, okay?
I understand. I understand.
But Tim, it's weird to have the same percentage. You and I are counting votes daily, and it's ranked choice, and these are transfers, right? Because it's ranked choice, we have to throw out the common elections because they don't apply. And my point is, because the obvious question comes up. Well, can we look back at the process and re-review this information as it came in to see how it's actually transferred, right?
Yeah.
Because again, I have never ever seen that. And what's the statistical chance of it being almost exact every single day that your sending runs, sometimes twice a day?
Yeah. So I haven't. Okay. So I haven't dived into the specifics. So I asked you to send me your numbers, and I know you said you'd send me some screenshots. What I did do the first time you asked about it, as you recall, I sent you what I could see as the first round choices. And we did see a change in the number of votes. We saw a change in percentage for each of the different candidates on the first round. I haven't I haven't had the time to dive into the question that your observation. But again, I can't really answer it. I'm not equipped to answer it. I'd have to take a look deeper. But I have seen the patterns go straight and not change much. I've seen the patterns change. Again, we're dealing with a lot of different elections. And we have to take a look at, in those updates, how many votes we were really talking about as well. So again, I don't want to hypothesize without actually having a chance to do an evaluation. But, if we're dealing with a small number of votes from update to update with those particular candidates, we may not see a large change in percentage either, because there may not have been a large number of new votes. Well,
and not to be, I want to just editorial. Seneca, I'm not here to discuss the city clerk issue. That's not fair to Tim. It's an entirely separate issue for which I need to have the city clerk here to explain, okay? Tim doesn't know about that. I don't think. So no, I know he doesn't. I'm being jocular, okay? But my point is, now back to the path, as they say. I want to emphasize this. It's not that there's a difference. It's the fact that it's, for practical purposes, no difference each day.
From a percentage standpoint, right? I mean, the number of votes did increase. It's just that the percentage didn't change dramatically.
The percentage transfer is frighteningly the same. Now, again, if it were, 5% difference, 10%, you have a difference. You expect that, right? Mm-hmm. Because it reflects.
Introducing the GMC Sierra EV Denali Edition 1. Capability you expect.
YouTube does
a choice. I'm not talking about that. And that's where a lot of people get it wrong. I am talking about the fact that this thing comes out as almost the same each and every time. And it's like Bugs Bunny is back there basically with his carrot, fooling around with things.
So I can tell you nobody's fooling around with things. The system is on an isolated system. It's been tested. It's been certified by the Secretary of State. The algorithm that we use for ranked choice voting, as I said, isn't just being used here. It's the same one being used over in San Francisco. So now the question is, can we explain the anomaly? I don't know. We'll have to take a look. But my explanation for it would be is that that's how our voters voted. It may not have come out with what you've expected, but that is what the voters have chosen, and that's how the votes were distributed. So, I mean, that is going to be my answer. It's that we reflected the transfers the way that the voters voted.
But see, again, in my opinion, and it really is that when it all comes down to things, it's my opinion regarding the data run. Okay, but in my opinion, it's not a matter of who the voters chose. Again, I say this, and I want it to hit home. You and I can count votes every single day. One day, Shane gets 80% of what Alyssa got sent over. The next day, it's 20%. And we go through this over a 5-day period, and it averages out to be 59%. You know what I say? Bravissima. Awesome, right? But to have the same damn percentage every single day, right? It's like, and I'm sorry to, make your ears do that.
Well, I do. As you're talking it through, I do want to make sure that maybe I want to make sure we're still on the same page. Yeah, let's talk it through just a little bit, just to make sure we're on the same page. Yeah. Because the run of ranked choice voting at the end of each day is exactly that. It's essentially a simulation. I've been trying to actually look for the best. You froze on me, Zenny. Are you still there?
I'm still here. No,
okay.
Brent, this is really what. And I'd love to have your view on this matter of a simulation. Go on. This really bugs the crap out of me. Go ahead.
I kind of my head, and it's kind of like...
Okay. I've been trying to figure out what the best way to call it, because it's not official, right? It's at that point in time with the number of votes, we run the simulation, and it shows if this is where we stop the election, this is how the ranked choice algorithm would report the votes that we've captured so far.
So I'm confused.
That's where it gets a little interesting. You mind if we kind of unpack that a bit?
I would appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. So each time we do an update at the end of the day, we start the ranked choice voting algorithm over again with everything that we had tallied up to that point plus the new. So it's not like we're just tallying the new votes and tacking them onto the ranked choice algorithm. No, it's what we've been asked to do, because there's different ways that we could do this. We could wait till we get every vote counted. Nobody likes this. We could wait till we have every single vote counted and then post the results and then run the ranked choice voting algorithm once, and everybody would see how it works.
It's nice to unwind after a long week of telling people how Liberty Mutual customizes your car insurance so you only pay for what.
But we kind of live in a time where everybody wants to say, well, where are we now? Right? We live in this. We live in this kind of an instant. I need an instant update. Where is it now? What's changed? We like our kind of. I'll use our sports analogies. ESPN ticker. We need to know what the score of the game is right now. Is it going to get flipped? How close are they at this point? So we enjoy that. That's what people want. They're looking for, and with the way that we're getting so many votes in by mail and so close to election day, you can see that it's taking us longer to get to the final vote. So people are, well, what are they going to post today? Or what is the new posting going to look like? Has something changed in the race? So we've got that setting. So ranked choice voting, the algorithm goes against every vote that we have in the system at that point in time. So, it's not like I freeze what the last update was. We erase that from the previous day. That was a snapshot of if I ran the algorithm yesterday, this is what the race would look like.
Can you explain what it means to run the algorithm? Because it sounds to me like you're saying it's a simulation, and you did use the term simulation.
I did that. I'm trying to, from the standpoint of voter education, trying to, because algorithm seems so computer, right? And I've been told that maybe simulation is a better way to put it, because it's not the final results until I certify, right?
Well,
So
as a guy who built a computer model of the Oakland A's, which could be used in the classroom in 2003 to 2010, when Michael Bean killed my game, shame on him. That's another story entirely, okay?
You have to tell me about it.
Yeah, simulations are algorithms. I built an algorithm to model what happens with ticket consumption with respect to economic performance in the model, right? And go on and on and on. All right, there's 946 equation sets. Okay. Point I'm making is it's essentially the same, but what we're talking about here aren't people. We're not talking about robots. We're talking about people who cast a vote and they made a choice. And to my mind, that's something that shouldn't be simulated. That should be just actual. Boom, boom, boom. And we should have a real-time able way of counting it. But it sounds like to me you're saying we don't have that.
Yeah, so what we have is, because we at that point in time don't have all the votes in the system, right? We're still counting votes. So let's say it's Monday and we're at 5 o'clock. And I want to give people a snapshot of where everything is at that point with what it is that we have counted so far, right? So for all of the traditional races, they're going to get where they are with the first count, because there's not choices, right? So, for the yes/no measures and so on, we're going to see how they're doing. And are they close? Are they getting closer? So we're comfortable with that, right? Now, it's an algorithm. So we have now got so many votes in with all of the different choices. So Monday we have a certain number of votes in. Well, so that's now in the system. And the next step, since you understand code, is, okay, we've got it in the database. We now have all of those votes to that point in time in the database. Have the ranked choice algorithm, which is another program, call it an app, run it against that data so that we can post, given what we have in the database right now, what would the results be? And so then when we get to Tuesday, now we've added a certain number of additional votes into the database, right? We've been able to scan more, and we then, we've got the database with a new set. I mean, it's got the ones that we had on Monday plus some additional ones. Mm-hmm. And we run the algorithm or the app against that database. And we say, now Tuesday, ranked choice voting against what's in the database now would look like this.
Yeah.
So if there's not a whole lot of new votes added into that race, then, as we start to get more votes, the percentage is probably not going to change as much, right?
Yeah, question.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that there's an algorithm that's running against the database implies the existence of an error term.
When the stakes are high at work, your tone matters. Grammarly's advanced tone suggestions.
As
an error term?
Yeah. In other words, since you're not actually manually sitting there and counting votes as they're split, all right, mechanistically, all right, it begs the question, is the algorithm properly operating to represent what you and I and a bunch of other people would do, which is basically sit down and hand count these votes? Okay, Alyssa's vote goes to Shang, Alyssa's vote goes to Peter Liu, or
Yeah.
you have to get the poll. And
So I hear what you're saying. The algorithm again, and I'm going to go back to our discussions at the beginning. There's some very smart people up at the Secretary of State that have evaluated, tested, and certified that. I keep calling it an algorithm. I just want to make that's what we call it. You want to call it an application, you want to call it a program.
Sure.
But the Secretary of State has, fully vetted and certified that program that we use, just like they've certified the ImageCast X, just how they've certified everything else in the system. And they've said that it tests and does exactly what you said. If we did it manually, we would come out with the same outcome as what the algorithm is doing against the data in the database.
But it begs the question, though. Did anybody do that kind of evaluation for the device as used for this election? Because here's why I say that. I've been at this matter quite a while, and whatever label you put on who or does what is like, okay? It's the process and the math. That's all I care about, the process and the math. And that's what I'm trying to drive home with everybody. Stop thinking about politics and left, right, and all this stuff, and start thinking tech. Because this digital divide is going to wreck you if you don't pay attention to it and start asking detailed questions. It's not an insult of you at all. You're a great person. I'm talking about what seems to me to be a question that needs to be asked even at the level of the Secretary of State.
Right.
Hey, did you evaluate this particular device against a real-time equivalent of you and I sitting down and actually counting? Because if there is a difference, Tim, that is an error term. And it sounds like that exists.
It does exist. Yeah, the Secretary of State has gone through the level of vetting, I believe.
You see what I'm getting at, Brent?
I'm with you.
He dances around, and I'm going to stop it there, but he dances around. And
I've got a few comments here because that was a lot to take in. So let's break it down real quick, one by one.
Yes.
Obviously, it's awkward because again, the I don't want to say he's the poor guy, but because he's had his chance to stand up, and I think he knows the issue, and now it's bit him, and I can't feel too bad for him again because, but it's natural just to feel empathy for the guy because he's dancing around and he's obviously uncomfortable. He admits that there's a statistical anomaly, and what you referenced in your assessment was logical. So there's an admittance there, and that you're doing a great job of reporting on this issue, and we don't have hard-hitting journalism on this issue. There's been, I don't want to say a blackout on the issue, but the bigger newspapers don't tend to get into this. We haven't seen it. That's why myself and Jim Woolsey, the former CIA director, and Brian Fox, the bash shell inventor, we do op-eds, like in the New York Times and such on this issue. He uses catchphrases that are part of the vendor corporate line, and those are the fact that he says the systems are isolated. I think that's a reference that they're not online during the actual event, I think is what he means by isolation. And the fact is, in order to be vulnerable and carry bugs forward into the process, they don't have to be online in that particular moment of the event. Those bugs, as you know, can carry forward. And the vendors that are involved, who, by the way, none of them can qualify for a national security clearance. They're online during the course of the year leading up to the event. So bugs are, an obvious issue. here. We don't know, and Tim doesn't know, I think fairly obviously, what the real problem is. I'd like to know, when he said he found out about the issue, who told him, who tipped him off, what he did in response. Did he contact the Secretary of State immediately? What her response is on this in her office. Unfortunately, the other defense terms that he uses about the system being tested and certified, I would respond with that Tim should speak with Roy Saltman, who is the father of the certification process, who has stated publicly that he admits the testing and certification process is a broken process due to the proprietary code in the system. And in Roy Saltman's words, he never assumed the vendors would be as dark-hearted as they turned out to be with their circumventing the testing and certification process. It's basically a cursory inspection. So he uses that to say everything's working fine here. But we know, again, that he doesn't really know, that he's overly reliant on the vendor. And this is the problem with the current proprietary systems. He also talks about a simulation here, which is really a preliminary count. And, you again highlighted the issues there. This is not inspiring voter confidence. And I think the mathematical anomalies that you referenced still need to be explained. And we've seen this before. We coined it an event. We have to be very careful here when advocating for the scientific community that we don't leap to conclusions, and no one's looking to crucify this particular administrator, this particular clerk. He's a victim of the system that we're using, and the simulation verbiage may be a bad choice of words. Moving forward toward solution rather than just complaining about where we are right now. If he can get his hands on an open source ranked choice voting tabulator, that would be a good suggestion moving forward. And also, your suggestion about where you keep alluding to a hand count, it's going to be cumbersome and painful and awkward and very, very challenging because of the ranked choice. But I think, somebody has to make a decision at this point. Are we just going to put our heads in the sand and say everything's okay and continue on to the next election? Or should there be a rerun of the election? Or should there at least be a hand count, 100% audit, which in my understanding is with ranked choice, part of the negative attached is it basically takes a hand count audit off the table because it's so cumbersome with the voting rounds. But if you can achieve it through a mass outpouring of the public that will volunteer, I guess if nothing else, it will show that it is not achievable. And there is another negative substantiated against ranked choice voting. I don't really know where exactly Tim's going to go from here, but I hope he stops trying to explain it away and just admits candidly to the public and forthrightly that we're in a predicament. It's not novel to Oakland. I mean, it exists in San Francisco as well. Anybody that says they know what's going on inside the system is either clairvoyant or Kreskin or BSing. And I think it's definitely the latter because you can't see through a black box, and that's what it is. So Tim is in this predicament now. He should, I think, rise up to his duty to the public and be candid and admit where there's problems. And let's see if we can move toward solution rather than this defensive-ness that he awkwardly portrays with your questioning. And thank you very much for representing the public and asking the hard questions here.
Oh, thank you. Brent, I appreciate that, and thank you for coming on and providing a much needed expert.
Finally, Benny, one last thing in closing. I want to say that
Please.
that his cop out saying that the need for expediency that he's gleaned from the public sentiment somehow, that they are in a rush for result. Well, that is true, and there is a sweet spot. You don't want to have the results take too long, but to be careless with the language on that point and purportedly sacrifice precision for expediency, I think that's an ill-conceived concept, and we need to be very careful that in no way are we sacrificing the precision of these systems, whatever they will allow with the current bad software environment. At least let's do the best we can with the systems we have until we upgrade them, and hopefully that's toward the open source model.
Hey, Brett, we're much better for having you on, because as I was about to say, I couldn't think of a better person to be able to be here and help us sort out what's going on. And by the grace of God, I've known you for a long time. And I remember when just before President Obama's inauguration, nomination, you were on this like Johnny, and relentlessly, and have had a dramatic impact on how we think about our voting. And so I couldn't, again, you were the top of the list, and it's a short list of people I was going to turn to, but you're the one who has had the longest history. You've been the most outspoken about both the problems and the advantages. Okay, I mean, you're a straight shooter both ways. So I'm blessed to have you on for and give us this extremely valuable take. Thank you.
Thank you, Zenny, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention some of the great local leaders that are stepping up and forward toward implementing the upgrades with the technology. The California Clean Money Campaign has been moonlighting on this issue and trying to get some legislation in place for open source voting. President of the Board of Supervisors in San Francisco, Shaman Walton, has been an advocate. He got caught in a bit of a political crunch with Supervisor Peskin recently, but I think Shaman is a righteous guy that is working for the public interest. And also a president of the Elections Commission in San Francisco, Chris Cherdonic, who got a bad rap by Tucker Carlson. But I think that speaks for itself. And so there is some local leadership and national leadership, Eric Swalwell, some other folks that are smart on this, and I think we will overcome. We're just in a race for the democracy, and thanks for the light you're shining.
You got it. Jake Wasserman says, I just missed the original description of the concerning panel. Can I get a recap? Jake, given the length of it and the fact that we're at the end here, I'm going to have to ask you, because it's digital media, and it's kind of nice for you to be able to do that. You can actually reverse time. And get an even better recap. The really authentic.
Can we do that ourselves and go back to 2015?
Maybe one day we'll be able to try. Maybe who knows what someone will be able to figure out that we can do, and then ask ourselves the question: do we really want to, right? but Jake, for the present, no. You can get. I'm not going to give you a recap that's less accurate than the one you can get just simply by grabbing the cursor and going back.
Tell them when you see the same number repeat over and over again, it makes your eyebrows raise.
There you go. Absolutely. Hey, Brent. You don't have to do anything. I'm going to end the broadcast, folks. Thank you all for watching. Please share these videos around. I'm in the middle of reviving my giant email list, so I'll take care of that. But the problem we have today is, I'm not a journalist. I'm a blogger. I'm a media entrepreneur. And as I said to someone, earlier today, I'm not going to go on a rant about it, but the simple fact of the matter is that a lot of people who claim to be journalists are not authentic about their values and about what's important. They use this veil of objectivity to hide their values. Bloggers, right up front, state their values, state where they're coming from. In my case, this happened strictly because of a weird glitch. There are people who are saying, oh, you just didn't want Shang to win. Well, here's the thing. Did I have concerns about her? Yeah, and I stated them in videos before. I said a year ago, and I'm just putting this out there again, that she changed. I've been acquainted with her for 8 years, and I started comparing her to Tracy Flick, the famous character played by Reese Witherspoon. You might remember that movie Election, Brent. And I said this to anyone who wouldn't listen, and I wrote it a year ago. And so my concern was that she would do anything to win. And that was why I couldn't bring myself to support her. I was open about the fact that early on, because he asked for my support, Ignacio de la Fuente came and asked for my support, and then I gave it because he asked. By contrast, Shang Tao, February 2nd of this year about to end, asked me to meet her in a Zoom meeting to discuss enhanced infrastructure financing district legislation because she didn't know about it. She didn't know about tax increment financing, which I'm an expert, and I've done it for 37 years. And so she didn't want everyone to know that we met. And I said, huh? And then on top of that, she had homework for me, but she didn't want to hire me as a consultant to get paid to do the homework. I'm not going to do that. That's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And she says, why don't you wait until I'm mayor, and then you can bring my consultant. And I said, I said, no, that's not something that is a good idea. and that's exactly how I went down. I have the text to demonstrate that we were going into the meeting and setting it up and everything else. Okay. And I hope to God she recorded it. But that really was not the right thing to do. And then on top of that, she subsequently refused my request for interviews after that. Just about, hey, Howard Turner or anything else. I'm a news person. I'm running a news organization, which also does digital marketing for people. And so we have had not one, we had Derek Sue, Monisha Carter, and Seneca Scott on as vloggers, opened it up to everybody. Okay. I believe that we in the political realm need to change how we do media, and it needs to help the candidate use it, get their message out. And that's what we provide to everybody. Okay. And I was candid and open about it. I run a for-profit organization, not a nonprofit. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. The organizations that were trying to attack me were nonprofits, and nonprofits are operating illegally as news in a partisan way. No. You don't do that. So I don't want to get off on that again. But my point is this. What I do is, and I've said this back as far back as anyone can find a video, is the work of a blogger and a vlogger. Journalists hide behind objectivity, and then they slide in their values in there so that they appear to be on either side when the reality is that they're not. And this is a consistent line. I mean, Brent, do you realize that the journalists that existed in the town that Emmett Till was killed in actually advocated for his death? It's a 15-year-old black kid, okay? I mean, these people have to be nuts, all right? So I'm supposed to side with that kind of behavior, which still exists in a number of cases today? Absolutely not. And because someone says, well, bloggers just state their opinion. Well, that's what journalists do, but they take their opinion, they couch it in something that looks like, it's objective and machine-like. No, because that's fooling the public, or trying to. And as far as I'm concerned, that is more than reprehensible. It's criminal. So I want everybody to know exactly where I'm coming from. Okay?
Well, we've seen it on this issue in particular, this third rail political issue of election system security. We see it with the media. So that's why you're especially appreciated by bringing light, because let's just see moving forward, now that you've tipped everybody off to the issue, how much of major media comes forward to get involved. And I think if they do, that will further push some of these candidates to contact the Secretary of State. And I think there should be an investigation open, personally.
Yeah, unquestionably. Hey, Brent, stick around in the background. We're going to have this guy back on again, and we're going to feed him pizza. The best. Are you eating pizza?
With you, we'll do it.
You got it.
Thanks.
Brent, you don't have to push a button. I got it, folks. Subscribe to Zenny62. Bookmark oaklandnewsnowblog.com. Follow and subscribe, because next week, CES Las Vegas, I'm not going to be there, but I'm going to do it virtually. And we're going to kick butt as we always do. All right.
Hey, Zenny, can I play